Welcome to our Concept 6 lesson, which is on how does soil form. And this is our final lesson in our Weathering, Erosion, Deposition, and Soil unit. So thanks for following along on the journey with me. If you can start by turning to page 82 in your notebook, and at the top of the page, go ahead and write this essential question, how does soil form? And then as you take your notes today, you can choose the type of note-taking that appeals the best to you. So remember, we've practiced sketchnoting. You can just copy what's on the screen. It's completely up to you on what you do for your notes for this. Just make sure that you are taking notes. So before we look at how soil forms, it's probably a good idea to get a working idea of what soil is. So what is soil? Soil is a loose mixture of weathered rock, organic material, air, and water. And so you've got sediment, basically, organic material, which is usually decayed, air, and water. So those are the four main ingredients to make soil. We also talk about soil texture, and soil texture refers to the size of the particles. Sand are the largest particles, silt are the medium-sized particles, and clay are the smallest, although silt and clay are both pretty fine in terms of sediment sizes. Some soil is really good soil, and some soil is not so good. If you go in your backyard and dig in the dirt, you'll probably find that our dirt's kind of clayey and not really great for growing things. If we did want to have really good soil, we would have a type of soil called loam. Unfortunately, we have lots of clay in our soil and not much sand or silt. Loam is an ideal soil that has nearly equal parts of sand, silt, and clay. What makes loam so good is that the sand lets just enough water be able to flow through the soil, and just enough of the water to be able to hold into the soil by the clay. The problem we have with the high clay content soil is that water gets into the soil and it's hard to drain through. So clay is not an easy draining soil. Sand drains too much. So if we add sand, silt, and clay together, then we get a really good mix that holds in just enough moisture but also drains well, but not too well. And then the last big thing that we need to know about before we look at how soil forms is humus, not hummus. Hummus is something you eat, it has two M's, and it's made out of garbanzo beans. Humus, which is in the soil, is rich decayed organic material that's in the topsoil that provides nutrients to plants. The majority of humus is in the topsoil, although some humus can be found in the other layers as well. And we're going to find out in just a second what that topsoil is. Alright, so let's look at our steps in soil formation. So the first thing that happens is that our bedrock forms. The bedrock is the bottom layer of soil, and it's referred to as the R horizon. And where we are, our bedrock is that granite that is underneath us. So that's the original rock that was formed. Remember that most continental crust is made out of granite, so a lot of places the bedrock is granite, although not everywhere. Over time, the bedrock begins to be weathered down by the processes that we've looked at previously. And as that bedrock is worn down, it becomes weathered bedrock. And weathered bedrock forms the sea horizon. So now it's not solid rock, but it's also not fine sediment yet either. Over time, as things begin to grow in this weathered bedrock like trees, the weathered bedrock gets finer and starts to make smaller pieces of sediment, and it eventually forms the A horizon, or the topsoil. And the topsoil is where the plants grow. As nutrients wash out of the topsoil, then the subsoil forms. So underneath the topsoil is horizon B horizon, also known as the subsoil. If you look at the subsoil layer, excuse me, it's usually going to be a lot less nice looking. So if you think of that topsoil layer as being rich, dark, black dirt, usually that subsoil layer is going to be not as dark in color, usually more of a light brown color, because a lot of those nutrients are gone because the plants have used it up. And finally, the last layer that's added is the O horizon, and this is from organic material that's added to the top of the topsoil. That forms the O horizon. Sometimes it's called litter. It's not trash, so we're not talking about trash here. What litter is partially decomposed organic material, like leaves. So whenever the leaves are falling, there's pine straw on the ground from the trees around us, that's litter. And if you watch, that begins to decompose and become part of the soil. So that's just all part of that soil formation process. So at any one time, there's always something happening in terms of soil forming. You're rarely going to see just that exposed bedrock that's slowly turning into soil, but I'm sure you've seen weathered bedrock, and I know you've seen topsoil and this litter layer. If we look at this in a diagram, you can kind of see those different layers. And so you've got the A horizon on top. You also can have the O horizon on top of that. But the A horizon has that topsoil. It has a lot of humus. And it says those in forests, but really a lot of places have that O horizon on top. There is also an E horizon, which we didn't talk about. Not all soil areas have the same profile. So this is called a soil profile. And not everywhere has a profile exactly like this. So there's sometimes an E horizon, which is made from intense leaching of nutrients out of the soil. And then the B horizon underneath that, which collects the dissolved substances, nutrients from those upper horizons. Below that is the C horizon, where the weathered bedrock is. And then finally the R horizon, that is pretty much solid rock. And that's really the basics of our steps in soil formation. And we're going to do a really cool lab in class that I think will totally make all of this make sense to you. And if we're lucky, you won't ever forget how soil forms because of this lab, because I said it's a pretty cool lab. So before we wrap up for today, please make sure you complete one question starter from each category, a basic question, an advanced question, and a thinking about thinking question, and be ready to share and discuss in class. Thanks for joining me.